Neil is a very old engine. He worked on Sodor a long time ago. Sir Topham Hatt had recently found him and sent him to the steamworks to be restored. Neil had already met Gordon and the Flying Scotsman. He had told them a story about his life on Sodor long ago, with Hero and the old controller, whose name was Mr. Dummins. One day, soon after Neil had told Gordon his story, Gordon told the other engines in the shed. "Huh," said Thomas. "He doesn't sound that useful. Anyone could have done that." "Not anyone," said Gordon. "Neil's a very special engine." "Huh," said Thomas. "Does he have a number?" Yes, I believe he's number 2, like Edward." "Well, he's not number 1, said Thomas, "and guess who is?" "We all know you're number 1, said Percy. "That doesn't make you any more special than the rest of us." "Huh, that's what you think," said Thomas, and he puffed away to work. Later, Thomas was doing his passenger run. In addition to Annie and Clarabelle, he had 3 more coaches because there were so many passengers. This made the load heavy. Thomas could see that by the steamworks, there were several engines lined up. They seemed to be waiting for something. "Probably waiting for that Neil to come out," said Thomas. "What's so special about him anyways? Nothing I can remember." I've pulled trains longer than the ones that Gordon said he pulled in that story." Meanwhile, at the steamworks, the engines were indeed waiting for Neil. Suddenly, they heard a whistle. "Here he comes," said James. And then, from around the bend, came Neil. He had a new driver, since the old one obviously wasn't as old as Neil. And Neil was looking as good as new. He was making steam very well. The engines all cheered for him. "Welcome to our railway," said Edward. "Do you know all of us? My name's Edward, and this is Henry and Toby, and over there are Duck, and you've met the Flying Scotsman, and his brother Gordon, and then that's Percy, James, and there are lots of other engines you have yet to meet." "I'm excited to meet them," said Neil. Just then, Kevin came up. "Thomas is stuck on the hill," he said. "He needs a back engine to get him up." "I'll do it," said Edward. "I'm usually the back engine for trains stuck on hills." "No, I have a better idea," said James. "Let's let Neil do it." "Me?" said Neil. "Why?" "Thomas is a cheeky little tank engine. He was teasing Gordon about your story, and in fact, teasing you." "Really?" said Neil. "He doesn't think there's anything special about you." "That's interesting," said Neil. "I don't either." "Oh, come on," said Duck. "You're a very special engine, and I think you need to go tell Thomas, or at least show him, what a really useful engine you are." "I suppose you're right," said Neil. So the turntable was turned for him, and Neil set off. Thomas was indeed stuck on the hill. His long line of coaches had weighed him down so much that he couldn't move another inch. "Oh dear," he said, "I hope an engine comes to help me." Suddenly, he heard an engine buffer up behind his last coach. "Who's that?" said Thomas. "That must be Neil," said his driver. "Pooh!" said Thomas. "Neil? Really? He'll never get me up this slope." Neil heard Thomas. His driver laughed. "Don't be discouraged, old boy. Come on, let's push him up the slope like nothing ever pushed nothing." "All right," said Neil. So he pushed as hard as he could, and to Thomas's amazement, the train began moving up the slope. "Whoa," said Thomas, "I'm actually moving." Neil pushed the coaches and Thomas, using all of his might, up the hill and onto the bridge. Thomas was most impressed. "Thank you, Neil," he called. And with that, he puffed away with his coaches. Neil was surprised. I wonder if this was really the Thomas that James had indicated to me. He seemed like a very respectable engine. "Yeah, well, he probably changed his mind after you helped him up that hill," said Neil's driver. "Now come on, let's go back to the engine shed." And so they set off. That evening, Neil was resting in one of the sheds by the steamworks. Thomas pulled up on the line next to him. "Thanks for pushing me up that hill today," said Thomas. "I'm really sorry I doubted your story. You really are an incredible engine." "Well, thanks," said Neil. "You're a pretty smart little engine yourself. I've heard a lot of stories about you. You're really useful." "Thanks," said Thomas. "Can we be friends?" "Of course," said Neil. And then Thomas happily chuffed away. And Neil, just as happily, backed into his shed and went to sleep.